Carry on.
Well, excuse me, I think we're finally ready to get started. We just waited for uploading the newest version to correct a little, typo. And this is Dr. Rosemary Cox, and she's from the English department here at Clarkson campus, right? Okay, and she's here today to talk about the tree canopy of Atlanta and the lesson of the Lorax. I hope you all have seen the movie. That would be exquisite.
Thank you. I'm just so delighted that you're all here this morning. Well, it's not this morning. It's this afternoon now. But you're probably wondering why a professor of English is giving a talk about trees. It's really kind of funny because my colleagues in the English department have been having a field day with the puns. When they knew that I was giving a STEM talk, they thought I meant the trunk of a tree. And then they were just delighted that I was branching out into other disciplines. And they were just so determined that I would not leave it alone. So I've been living with this for the last couple of weeks, but it's really wonderful. I see this wonderful colleague. I do feel pretty qualified to talk about trees. My father was a botanist. He was the director of horticulture at Stone Mountain Park from 1961, which is when the Memorial Association first took over the park, until he retired in 1983. And he held the coveted Q certificate, which you may or may not know is the degree granted by the Royal Horticultural the Gardens Act Q in London. And so he came to America in 1948 to grow camellias, and of course from there he went on to be the director of horticulture at Stone Mountain Park. But we lived in the park behind the greenhouse, and I grew up literally managing a greenhouse, and I guess I was taught by the master. So my father imparted to me, whatever he could. Suddenly, if I knew only a quarter of what he knew, I would consider myself an expert. He was just absolutely magnificent. So I really would like to dedicate my talk today to my father, and it's very special. Anyway, moving along, the lesson of the Lorax. Actually, let me go ahead and see if I can move this forward. Yes, it actually works. Okay. I went ahead and put this funny little picture of a tree face here. Of course, I thought it looked rather like a Lorax. I wanted to ask you all, when was the first time that you really realized that trees are special? I mean, after all, when I was growing up in the park, I had a very special tree. It was the Osage orange that overshadowed our house. So my sister and I we played dolls and had tea parties underneath this beautiful, beautiful tree. And even though the house has been torn down many years, in 2006, I actually had that tree listed as a Georgia Tree Champion. I'm actually in competition with a woman in Thomasville. Hers is wider. Mine is taller. But if you go to the park, you can certainly go and visit the Osage orange. It's an absolutely beautiful tree, but it's a very special tree to me. And I'm sure that you probably had a tree that you climbed as a child, or just some special relationship that you had with a tree. Perhaps maybe the first time you learned about trees was when your mother or father read to you that story called The Lorax by Dr. Seuss. And of course, the real picture of the Lorax, I'm just going to put the dot cam right here for a moment. This is the actual Lorax. If it'll pull up. No? It's not working? No, it's dot cam. Hold on. Wait a minute, I've got the wrong thing. Of course, technologically challenged. Push the wrong button. But the Lorax, there he is, right there, the Lorax. And if you're familiar, of course, with the story, the onceler comes in with all of his equipment, and he's building the sleeves out of these truffula trees. And of course, the little Lorax is there, the lone voice in the wilderness. So, and I have copied just a section from the story. He says, "I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees have no tongue. And I'm asking you, sir, at the top of my lungs," he was very ecstatic, he shouted and puffed, "what's that thing you've made out of my truffula?" Anyway, poor little Lorax. I wanted us to look today specifically at the urban forest because there are special needs with urban forests as opposed to those, of course, that are like in national parks. They don't have the same kinds of stresses. American Forest defines the urban forest as ecosystems of trees and other vegetation in and around communities that may consist of street and yard trees, vegetation within parks and along public rights-of-way and water systems. Urban forests provide communities with environmental, economic, and social benefits and habitats for fish and wildlife. American Forest also goes on and talks about the unique ecology of the urban forest. They're saying that because of their proximity to human activity, urban forests are exposed to more human-made disturbances than their rural counterparts, which can negatively affect their health, growth, and ability to perform ecosystem services. They're subject to much higher rates of pollution than rural areas, threatening the health of both people and urban forests. And certainly, you know, we've had extreme weather conditions. We had drought for a great many number of years, and then we've had flooding. And these kinds of stresses are particularly detrimental to the urban forest. I mean, they affect all forests, but certainly the urban forest suffers even more from that. Not only that, we have non-native invasive species and diseases that are introduced in urban areas, which threaten our urban forests, and those problems can also spread to rural forests. And certainly, as urban areas continue to expand, forests become fragmented and destroyed, decimating forest health and biodiversity. You know, sometimes you think there's just like a tree there, you know, that it can sort of withstand all these stresses and strains. But trees actually help each other. You know, they really do need other trees. And of course, in the urban environment, many times that's not available. The first question I wanted us to consider was, you know, why should we plant and preserve trees? And this particular tulip poplar is actually at the Botanical Garden here at GBC, you know, down at Decatur campus. We have this wonderful native botanical garden. I'm interjecting also some literary things. You might have expected that. You know, the English teacher in me is not going to let you get away without a poem or two. The live oak that you're seeing here, and the quotation here from Sidney Lanier's The Marshes of Glen. Glooms of the live oak, beautiful braided and woven, with intricate shades of the multiform boughs, beautiful glooms, soft dusts in the noonday fire, wildwood privacies, closets of lone desire. Lanier goes on quite at length describing the live oaks, you know, before he gets into his real subject, which of course is the marshes of Glynn County. But I wanted to use this quote to kind of emphasize the fact that trees do provide many sort of psychological benefits to us, social benefits, physiological, which would be health benefits, psychological and recreational benefits. For Lanier, who was dying of tuberculosis, what he would do is he would go into the shades of these beautiful live oaks, you know, in the heat of the day. This is pre-air conditioning. Sidney Lanier was actually a soldier in the Confederate Army in the Civil War. And of course, down there on the coast, it gets excessively hot and humid in the afternoons in the summer. And so what he would do is he would go and he would, you know, lie underneath these oaks. And he called them these closets of lone desire. And he talks about weighing the evil, you know, the sin with good, back and forth. So trees do provide places for us to go for refuge, for succor, for inspiration, just to sort of heal us spiritually as well as psychologically. Certainly there are health benefits, and we have a quote here from Dr. Roger Ulrich. He says, in laboratory research, visual exposure to settings of trees has produced significant recovery from stress within 5 minutes, as indicated by changes in blood pressure and muscle tension. That's amazing when you think about it. But just being near a tree sort of allows you to kind of relax and sort of, you know, forget the stresses and cares of the day. It's really, really beautiful. This is another quote I wanted to share with you from Ralph Waldo Emerson. This is from his very famous essay, Nature. The greatest delight which the fields and woods ministers is the suggestion of an occult relation between man and vegetable. I am not alone and unacknowledged. They nod to me, and I to them. Emerson was pretty ridiculed for this quote, among other things that he had said in nature, but anyone who has had, any experience with trees, whether you walk in the Appalachian forest or, just, go into the woods in your backyard, certainly you can sort of sense that what you're doing is communing with nature. And so when Emerson says that they nod to me and I to them, I think he is making that spiritual connection. He, of course, is the great transcendentalist. And the picture that you're looking at right here is actually out of my own backyard in Henry County. I have 10 acres of land down there, which I'm actually making into a wildflower preserve, by the way. Another good thing that trees do for us is that they provide food and habitat for wildlife. And these butterflies were actually in North Carolina. They were against the stream bank here, but they're finding some nutrients there in amongst the tree roots. But certainly, where would birds be without trees and shrubs to provide berries and different, types of things that they eat? And of course, also the insects. And one interesting thing about planting native plants and native trees is that they actually encourage native populations of insects, which feed the birds. When we plant non-native species of plants and trees, the insects in this area are not familiar with those types of plants, and so therefore they usually stay away. And so you're not providing proper food and habitat for wildlife when you're using non-native species. So it's very important that you choose well when you're designing the landscape of your yard. Getting to some of the monetary values, certainly trees increase property values. And I've taken some quotes here from various sources. The first one here, it says a study of the costs and benefits of trees in 5 U.S. cities shows that for every dollar invested in tree planting and maintenance, $2.23 is generated in community benefits. And about 60% of these benefits were estimated to be in the form of enhanced property values. So you actually can increase your property value by planting trees or preserving trees that are there. There's lots of different estimates that range anything from 10% to 20%. Arbor Day Foundation actually says it's about 15%. So math majors, you can help me with this. If you have a house that's $200,000, you've got 3 mature trees on your property, is that about $30,000 of its value that you could attribute to the trees, right? Right, math major? Okay. But I mean, certainly it does make a significant difference. Also polling realtors, 83% of them believe that mature trees have a strong or moderate impact on the saleability of homes listed for under $150,000 on homes over $250,000. The perception increases to 98%. So that's incredible, and these are all ecological benefits. And of course, the Council of Tree and Landscape Appraisers says that a mature tree can often have an appraised value of between $1,000 and $10,000. So something to think about. As far as utility costs go, if you're planting a deciduous tree is one that loses its leaves in the winter. They drop. In other words, what we're going through right now, all those deciduous trees are dropping their leaves. But if you plant a deciduous tree on the south and west of a building, it shelters and cools the building during the summer, but allows the sun to warm it in the winter after the leaves fall, thus reducing the annual cost both of heating and cooling. So you have to look at it, in terms of both of those. A young, healthy tree basically is the equivalent of 10 room-sized air conditioners operating 20 hours a day. That's the net cooling set. That's incredible, isn't it? And that's from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. I guess we have to believe their statistics. The other thing is that if you plant a tree today on the west side of your home, in 5 years, your energy bill should be 3% less. In 15, the savings will be nearly 12%. I mean, these are measurable savings that you can get. And again, the air conditioning thing here, trees around the buildings, and again, notice they're properly placed, can cut those air conditioning needs by 30% and can save 20 to 50% in energy used for heating. So again, very important. Oh, question in the back. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Usually sometimes we like have a tree next to the building and is that, growing in and growing.
Yes. You have to be very, very careful. We're actually going to address some questions about planting trees in just a few minutes. But absolutely, you have to make sure that you leave adequate space between, if you're planting a tree, at least adequate space between the building and the tree. And the important thing, too, is to visualize how big that tree is going to be when it's at a mature height. Many people will buy a tree when it's only this high, and they'll plant it, 3 feet away from the house because it looks good right there. But, by the time the tree has got 15, 20 years on it, here it is, 50, 60 feet in the air, completely overshadowing the house, undermining the foundations, all those kinds of problems. You need to plan wisely when you're going to plant trees.
At the parking lot here, trees are not walked on.
Uh-huh. Yeah, they're breaking up the sidewalk. Yeah. It's a real problem. Although I will tell you, there are ways to plant them. Trees Atlanta has come up with a lot of ways to get around very cramped areas where trees have to be planted. And it's interesting, you would never plant a tree where you've got this solid concrete slab, to give it just a tiny little bit of space. Trees breathe through their roots. So pavement that basically is done like cobblestones, like bricks that are not really close together but leaving a little bit of space, actually works very well because the water can percolate down, oxygen can percolate in, much better for the tree, and people can still walk over it. So it's really, Trees Atlanta is doing a lot of different things. Anyway, we've got other economic benefits. The USDA Forest Service says that businesses flourish. People linger and shop longer, apartments and office space rent quicker, tenants stay longer, property values increase, and new business and industries attracted by trees. Again, this is psychological. The physical effects of trees, the shade, solar regulation, humidity control, wind control, erosion control, evaporative cooling, sound and visual screening, traffic control, pollution absorption, and precipitation all have economic benefits. There's really no reason not to plant trees, really and truly. Looking at some of the environmental benefits, again, the water quality is really impacted because trees do prevent a lot of the runoff. They're really, they absorb a lot of the runoff water that would normally be going straight into the streams. And again, that helps also recharge the groundwater supply. Again, the wooded areas help to prevent the transport of sediment and chemicals into streams. So, very, very important element as far as that goes. And again, here we have some of the sort of the facts about stormwater management. And one other thing about that, too, is, and this one sort of fact about the cryptosporidium. In 1993 in Milwaukee, apparently 54 people died and 403, 1,000 illnesses in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and they thought that was from stormwater runoff into the stream, and apparently got into the drinking water. So it's really a public health concern. We all know about the fact that air quality management is extremely important in urban areas. Atlanta during the summer has all of these smog alerts, code red, code orange, code purple, whatever it is. Trees actually help prevent a lot of this problem. Ozone, of course, created by the chemical reactions between nitrogen oxides and organic compounds in the presence of sunlight. And of course, we've got cars and factories and all other kinds of things creating these vapors, which are then becoming these very serious levels of ozone. The stomata on trees actually absorbs a lot of those pollutants, and it converts it, uses those enzymes to convert that stuff into less harmful compounds. Also, particulate matter, stuff that begins as smoke or diesel soot, which is very detrimental to people, especially with heart or lung problems. Again, trees, they don't necessarily suck it up. What they do is the particulate matter is attached to the leaves so that if it rains, it can wash off, or, it kind of holds it there until some other factor, maybe wind blows it off. But you can just imagine if all that stuff was just allowed to proliferate in the atmosphere, we would just be suffocating. It would be like living in a sandstorm. So basically, evergreen trees in particular capture a lot of this particulate matter. So it's very, very important that we go ahead and, make sure we have trees to prevent that. Certainly temperature regulation. Now, I haven't actually mentioned the word global warming in any of this because we're looking specifically at just our urban area, but certainly any kind of temperature regulation for the local environment is also going to equate to, better global climate conditions as well. Certainly, with Atlanta in particular, we have lost, I think the statistics here are something like 600 million trees over the last 30 years. That's not specifically Atlanta, that's, urban areas in general. I mean, that's incredible. And what's happening is that it's creating the heat island. I don't know if you're aware of it, but Atlanta has its own weather system, which basically is created by the heat island in the summer. And as you notice how the rain will come across from Alabama, you watch the weather map. And they'll come right across, it'll rain in Carrollton, it'll rain in Douglasville, and then suddenly it goes to the north or it goes to the south. We miss it. Well, that's because we have this heat island right in the center here. It's making its own weather system. Trees help reduce that. They help mitigate that. They also help cool down these heat waves. And again, as the planet warms, we're going to see more of these. They're going to be hotter, longer, and more frequent and earlier in the year. So we need more trees. The Nature Conservancy, its goal this year is to plant 1 million trees. That's their goal. Trees Atlanta, they have just received a contract from the city of Atlanta. They're going to plant 4,000 trees over a period of 2 years. And they've already made a good start on that. We're Brook Run, you'll see some slides of that in a minute, but we were planting, we got 300 trees in. Of course, mind you, they had a backhoe in dig the holes. We didn't dig all those holes. Something else interesting here, too, in parking lots. If they have tree cover, they emit 8% less pollution through evaporative emissions than cars parked in parking lots with only 8% canopy cover. Canopy, when the heat belts down on your car, those vapors evaporate out, and then you've got the asphalt, the vapors coming off of that as well. And so if you plant trees, it cools it all down, and then it also stops that cracking and buckling of the pavement, so that means less heavy equipment, belting out fumes and all this kind of stuff. So all together, much, much better to have more trees. Other benefits, of course, they provide oxygen, they beautify the landscape, improve the image of the community, they absorb noise, reduce glare, dust, and heat, and fruit trees provide food. They really do. All right, here we go. What's the best way to plant a tree? Here we are. This is at Brook Run. I was really kind of disappointed. If I had my act together, I would have gotten a Georgia Perimeter College group together. Georgia Tech had this huge contingent of students. So did Southern Polytech, and they were all there, rip-roaring and ready to go. 9 o'clock in the morning. I was the only person from Georgia Perimeter College, and this is just around the corner from Dunwoody campus. So, guys, we're going to have to make up for this. We're going to have to definitely get a GPC contingent out here to plant some trees. But anyway, this was the demonstration tree that they were putting in here. Some of the considerations about planting trees here, first and foremost, right tree, right place. You really have to select the right kind of tree, the right species, the right size. You cannot just, pick the first one and just stick it in. You have to think ahead, and you have to know the plant and visualize how it's going to look. I want to share another snippet from Shakespeare with you. Under the greenwood tree, who loves to lie with me, and turn his merry nose into the sweet bird's throat. Come hither, come hither, come hither. There he shall see no enemy but winter and rough weather. That's from As You Like It. It's actually a song that's sung in the play there. But again, it's the whole idea of, planting trees, and it's just, a wonderful thing, wonderful place to be. When you're planting, as we had said, select an appropriate species of tree. You're going to have to really look at your landscape and do your homework. You really need to know how tall a tree's going to get, how wide it's going to get. You need to worry about the shape of it. One thing that Trees Atlanta emphasized is that if you're planting trees along a roadway, like on the edge of a sidewalk, you cannot have a tree that's going to be branching out because it's going to come over the road, and it's going to be pruned by big trucks coming down. It's not good for the tree, and it's not good for the trucks either. You want one that's going to be maybe vase-shaped, something like a Princeton elm, so that, the natural way the tree grows is going to be appropriate for the situation where it is. But if you're going to plant one in Piedmont Park, then certainly you can have one that's going to be sprawling out, with its great big branches. So again, understand the kind of tree that you're going to use. Now is the best time to plant a tree, actually between November to March. You want to reduce that transplant shock, and you want to promote the root growth. So now is the time to do it. Also, to buy a tree from a reputable vendor. I know not too long ago I bought what I thought was a keeper pear from just a sort of a local hardware store. And of course, by the time I planted it and waited however many years for it to, to grow and to bloom and to fruit, it turned out the thing was a raspberry pear. No. They sold fast one on me, because I was just being too much of a cheapskate to order from the company that I usually buy my fruit trees from. Not giving them any adverts, but it's Stark Brothers. They have excellent stuff. You can always guarantee that, you're going to get what you pay for. So be very careful about buying trees from a reputable vendor. You want one that is insect-free, that has no major scars on the trunk, that has a good branching structure, a central leader, usually with horizontal branching, again, depending on the species. Again, carefully consider the location. Don't plant it where it's going to interfere with a building or with those overhead or underground power lines. And you can call 811 to find out where those utilities are. Also, make sure it doesn't have sightline problems for cars or pedestrian traffic or even signage. You really have to look, open your eyes and look before you start planting trees here. And again, match your yard's environmental factors with the physiological needs of the tree. Soil type, water availability, sun exposure, hardiness. You've got to really sort of take this into consideration. You cannot plant a tree that prefers, like a wet area in a place that's absolutely, desert-like conditions. You have to sort of, use your common sense as far as the conditions are concerned. Interestingly enough, Trees Atlanta says that plant trees, particularly that are accustomed to living in sort of riparian environments, which are those along stream banks, or in sort of wet areas, things like bald cypress, do very well in urban settings. Now, you would think that that would be a total contradiction, but it's not, because trees that live in an area where the soil is primarily wet don't have much oxygen. They've learned to cope with a low oxygen soil. So when you plant them in the city setting, again, low oxygen, because we've got all this pavement and mostly the soil is very compact and very hard, because it's, buildings and they bulldoze off all the topsoil, that kind of stuff. So interestingly enough, those kinds of trees grow well. Again, make sure it has plenty of room to grow. I wanted to share with you also some pictures. This is an oak tree on Clarendon Avenue in Avondale. Don't plant it too close to a sidewalk or a street. On this one, the sidewalk is at the back, the street is at the front, and this poor tree has done the best it can, and you see what's happening. Its roots are like coming all over everywhere. That's bad for the tree. It weakens it, and it's also cracked all the sidewalk, which is bad for us. Cracked the street. I'm sure the county's not very happy about that. So really, this water oak should not have been planted in that tiny little strip. Avoid planting under power lines. This is another poor old tree in Scottsdale. I drive past this one every day coming into work. So again, don't put. You see what they do? Georgia Power has no mercy. Their line is take precedence over everything. We all know that. Avoid planting too close to the house. Now, I will confess, this is also Scottsdale, I will confess that this tree probably is one that was just a seedling. I doubt seriously if these people planted this water oak. But the trouble is they have allowed it to grow, and what's going to happen is that ultimately it will push the house over. So that's not a good idea, really and truly. Just some planting tips. Again, we're back to Brook Run Park here, and there's the Trees Atlanta expert there, just kind of measuring the tree there. One of the first things to remember is that you have to dig a $200 hole for a $50 tree, essentially. It's very important. You dig that hole twice as wide as the container, and you can take your shovel handle and you can measure it, 1, 2, and make the hole at least as wide as two widths of the container. When you dig the hole, slope it down and flatten the bottom. You make it look like a coffee filter or some kind of bowl. You bring it down. Trees don't need to be very deep. They're not making roots down in the bottom there. They're making roots at the top. They need to breathe. And what you need to do is to encourage that. And so actually you can take your spade and score down the size of the hole. And if you find that you've got roots that are kind of coming out, you actually can, when you put your tree in, you can actually cut little channels to let those roots spread out. You want to encourage them to go out and branch out as much as possible. So the hole is extremely important. One question that usually comes up with this too is, should I add soil amendments to the soil? You know, I have mixed feelings about it. If you're planting in 100% red clay, you know, I'm inclined very much to add some type of soil amendment. But Trees Atlanta is pretty adamant about it. And they have a 95 success rate in the trees they plant. They say no. They say you put the soil into that hole that came out of it, and all of it in there, because the tree has got to get accustomed to growing in that soil. And if you start adding amendments, what it's going to do, it's going to start circling around and around and around in that hole, and it's not going to be branching out. And you're just weakening the tree. So again, you know, really don't worry so much about amending the soil. Depth is important. Don't plant it too deep. If it sits up about half an inch above, then that's actually better than having it low. And what you're going to try and do is match the root flare. That's where the trunk kind of branches out, and the root collar comes out. That has to be level with the top of the soil. So you may have to play around with it. When you dig your hole, if you stick it in there and it's too deep, you're going to have to, you know, take it out, put some more soil in there. If it's too shallow, you may have to dig some more out. You know, you got to play with it until you get it about the right height there. The other thing is, once you take it out of its container, make sure that, you know, if it's burlap, ball and burlap, take off the burlap, take off the wire, plastic, string, take all that stuff off. And not only that, it's very important to kind of massage the roots. You might think this is bizarre, but you need to loosen those roots. If they've been growing in a container and, you know, they're going round and around and around, they're, you know, circling, gurgling in that container, and they're all matted up. Sometimes at the bottom it's a really thick mat. You know, go at it. You need to break that stuff up. What you're doing, if you can take like a spade, or maybe if you've got like a pruning knife or something, you can actually split down the ball a little bit, not to sever the roots, but to do it like vertically, so that what you're doing is loosening them. And actually, any roots that are curling around, pull them out, straighten them out, so the poor thing can actually spread out and breathe. That's very, very important to do that. So just some things to think about when you're actually trying to get your tree planted. Again, you take it out of the massage the root ball, remove any sod and grass. That stuff is the enemy of trees. Take it out. And it's really funny, Trees Atlanta tells us to stash it away like under bushes and stuff like that, you know, just kind of pack it away and just let it kind of dry up and become mulch. You know, you don't want to put it back on the tree because it competes for moisture. Keep it perpendicular, get it in there straight. If the tree is strong enough, it should stand on its own. It shouldn't need staking. Many times you will see situations where trees are staked. If you are going to stake it, then you put these flat belts on it. Don't use wire or hose, anything like that, because you're going to damage the trunk. But you would stake it so that it stands, you know, perpendicular. And then, of course, make sure you remove that stuff after about a year's growth, because it will actually strangle the tree if you leave it on there. But most of the time, it's better to leave a tree to wave in the wind. It strengthens itself. It's like a muscle, you know, in our bodies. If we are, you know, running and walking and using it, we're strengthening that muscle. Well, for trees, when they're waving in the wind like that, they're strengthening themselves. So if you're bracing them with these stays, actually you're really weakening it. Let's see, as far as planting it goes, when you put the tree in, you fill the soil back in. Don't get your foot, you know, to get it all nice and hard down there. You want to keep it as light as possible. So you can take the end of your spade and you can, you know, just kind of tamp it down in there to get the air pockets out if you need to do that. Certainly, after you have planted your tree, it's very important to perform the post-planting maintenance. It's important to mulch it, but don't mulch it right up against the trunk. I noticed my neighbors have just they've been raking their leaves, and they piled this mound of leaves about 3 foot high, and I'm not exaggerating, all around the trunk of this big pecan tree. That's not good. I mean, trees need mulch, but they don't need it right up on the trunk. It's best to go ahead and put it like a donut around it, and that also helps when you put water in it. It holds the water in the center of it. You need to water it. Basically, a 10-gallon container, the tree in a 10-gallon container would require about 10 gallons of water about once a week. Again, depending upon the rain, You know, use your common sense for this, but it does need to be watered and continued right through the growing season, especially through the first summer. Pruning, again, sparingly. You need to be real careful about pruning. Certainly a mature tree, you have to employ the 1/4 rule, and that is that you're not going to take off more than 1/4 of the crown during the growing season because you will definitely damage it. I'm using here also another literary quote. I saw in Louisiana a live oak growing. All alone stood it and the moss come down from the branches. But I wondered how it could utter joyous leaves standing alone without its friends near, for I knew I could not. That's from Walt Whitman, a beautiful, beautiful poem. I saw in Louisiana a live oak growing. But it's the whole idea that this beautiful tree is by itself. Actually, the tree you're looking at is the Sidney Lanier oak in Glenn County. That's not in Louisiana, but it's the nearest I could come to a live oak growing on its own. But anyway, one thing I wanted to emphasize here is not to panic. We've had a lot of storms, and, you know, trees have been coming down left, right, and center, you know, old oaks, pines, whatever, you name it. And people are beginning to panic, and they are having trees cut down en masse around their houses. Just really don't panic. If your tree has survived the storm.
Here's a question from online.
Yeah. Online, yes, ma'am.
He was wondering, what is the 1/4 rule?
The 1/4 rule.
1/4 rule.
Do not cut more than 1/4 of the canopy out of a mature tree in the growing season, because if you cut more than that, then what you're doing is impacting the tree's ability to produce food. You know, leaves produce food. And also what's happening is that the tree's leaves on the outer edge of the canopy protect the leaves on the inside, so that when you're in terrible drought situations, the leaves on the top stop producing food, but the ones on the inside do produce it. So once you cut off those protected leaves, then what's happening is that you're impacting the ability of the tree to produce food, and it will literally starve to death. So don't cut more than 1/4 of the canopy away from a mature tree. That's the 1/4 rule. Okay? All righty.
So when's the pruning?
I'm sorry, dear?
When is the appropriate time to prune?
Actually, when the tree is dormant is the best time to prune, but even then, I would not strip more than 1/4 away from a mature tree. So, you know, the best thing is really to just to have an arborist, a certified arborist, come out and have a look at the tree. If you have a situation where you've got it really coming over the house, I realize that we have to compromise. You know, you cannot have these huge branches all, you know, over your house. But I would have an arborist look at the situation and assess what needs to be done. But you have to be very careful. Otherwise, you know, the tree's not going to immediately show the effects of that. I mean, it may be 10, 15 years, but, I mean, ultimately you will kill it. Yes, dear. It's Darian, isn't it? I remember you from my class, yeah?
When I was doing apples and
Yes.
and there used to be like some different types of like leaves growing from the lemon tree that were not like similar to the lemon tree stuff, and like that was
Right. That's because the tree was grafted. Do you know what a graft is? You know, when you have, and you can do this with other kinds of plants, not just trees, but fruit trees in particular are grafted. You know, when you go to the grocery store and buy those luscious apples or pears and things, you know, in nature, you know, if you just had a seedling tree, if you tried to grow a seed from the apple that you ate, it would not come to be a tree like and produce apples like the one you ate, because the apple you ate was from a grafted tree. What they've done is they take a stalk, and onto that tree, what they do is they like cut it back, and they take a piece of a tree that they know fruits well, and they literally kind of marry it into the original stock plant, and it grows, and then of course it becomes a tree that fruits, you know, like you want it to do. And they do this with citrus trees a lot too. And so what happens is sometimes the graft is weak, and the stock, being the stronger plant, takes over. And so you have to cut that off, otherwise it will dominate and you'll lose the variety that you bought when you bought the tree. So that's what was happening, yeah, absolutely. And it happens very frequently, especially with fruit trees, yeah, for sure. Anyway, but what I'm saying here is, you know, the ones left in your yard after storms are the healthy survivors, so don't be freaking out and have the bulldozers in and cut everything down. One way that we can preserve the trees that are already there is, of course, to eliminate invasive species. I mean, I could go on like forever and ever and ever talking about invasive species. This is going to be just sort of a Cliff Notes version of invasive species. Basically, what is an invasive? Usually it's non-native, although some native plants can be invasive. I've got Carolina jasmine, which is a native and trumpet vine, you know, both native, beautiful, but boy, they just go hog wild. You know, they'll take over if you let them. Invasive plants have a negative effect on the ecosystem by displacing native plants, and usually they're characterized by rapid growth, early maturity, and effective seed dispersal. So they're really good at making themselves into a nuisance. Where do you find them? Usually in edge habitats or other disturbed areas. And edge habitats basically are houses that back up to woodlands, roadsides, stream corridors, construction, demolition sites. These are the typical places, although as we speak in my backyard, I know I have some English ivy I need to eradicate. So maybe I'll get out there in the winter and really find go to it. This is a map, which actually I have courtesy of Brian Williams. He's the Forest Restoration Coordinator with Trees Atlanta. The reason why a lot of plants that we have from China, you know, Japan and China, are invasive is because if you look at the global map here and draw that line, we are basically at the same latitude as China, Japan, Korea. These areas, the thing of it is our environments are similar, but different enough so that when you bring a plant from China, where the climate is drier than it is here, even though the temperatures are about the same, we get more rain. So this plant, you know, as soon as it gets there, it just goes wild, you know, and it just, proliferates. And it's interesting, it goes the other way too. You know, goldenrod, for instance, has become a real plague in China. And it's one of our, you know, beautiful roadside plants. You know, it stays in bounds here, but, you know, you take it out of its natural environment and it's going to go bonkers. So again, you know, you have to be careful about these things. Kudzu is the poster child for invasive species. I mean, that's just the bottom line, period, end of story. It actually was introduced, I think it was at the World's Fair of 1876, and it was hailed as the, you know, solution to the erosion problem in the Southeast. And so farmers were actually planting it. And, of course, it didn't take them very long to figure out what was going on. It just completely took over. And I'm sure you have seen trees that have been strangled by kudzu. And it is the most difficult stuff to eradicate. It is unbelievable. You have to get the crumbs. You can actually cut them and paint Roundup, what is it, you know, any one of those weed killers on it, but it's just awful. And also mowing, there's a good number on kudzu. But there's 5 different varieties of it, and they all kind of interbreed, so, I mean, it's just prolific, to say the least. Another one, which is a complete plague, is wisteria. And this particular one happens to be in my neighbor's yard in Decatur, and this one is trimmed back every year, but you can see those runners just starting out. And what they do is they get around trees and they girdle them, and you know, these real thick vines, and it's like a big python strangling the life out of it. And the amazing thing about both kudzu and wisteria, they have these lovely flowers on them, and they smell heavenly, and yet they're just so insidious. Now, there is a native wisteria. It's much less flamboyant than the Japanese or Chinese variety, but it does not become invasive. So if you must have wisteria, then plant the native, please. The next one that I absolutely abhor is this Chinese privet, ligustum. This stuff takes over, particularly along stream banks, and it just absolutely proliferates. And if you cut the stuff down, then it sprouts back up. I mean, it's just horrible. But this time of year, the young ones you can pull up, and it's actually a good way to get rid of it if you can pull it up. English ivy, of course. Most of the time, this is left over from old homesteads, but this stuff gets up trees. What you need to do is cut it off, or, you know, don't let it go up. Even if you let it go on the ground there, it's a good ground cover, but, you know, cut it so that it doesn't go up and strangle the trees. You can also cut the stems that are a finger, as wide as your finger, and you can paint Roundup on that. Or you can go over with your weed eater and mush up the leaves and then spray it with Roundup. If you're into the Roundup, I don't use Roundup. I'll get out there and pull it up by hand, basically. But it's awful. Bamboo. Oh, the plague of all time, bamboo. There's lots of varieties of it, and all of them are invasive. They all go with rhizomes all coming out, and it's horrible, horrible stuff. The best thing is never plant it. But if you must, those of you that listen to Walter Reeves on a Saturday morning, he talks about how you can plant bamboo. What you have to do is, I think you have to sink down like a barrier. I don't know how deep you have to go, but you've got to put this big barrier down in the ground. Some of these, yes, I don't know how deep it is. It's horrible stuff. Yes, ma'am.
The strange thing about it, at my house, I was wondering, is this possible? No one at my house has planted bamboo, and we always see it come up.
Somebody else planted bamboo. Yeah, whenever you see it come up, you need to just basically cut it down. You want to just keep it at bay. Otherwise, it will take over. I mean, it's like a monster. It really is. I don't know which is worse, bamboo or kudzu. They're pretty bad. Another one that we love to hate is the calorie or breakfast pears. You can see all these little seeds on it. These are the ones that bloom so pretty and white in spring. They're the first ones to come out. They're all, the guy on the radio called them corporate pears because every building in Atlanta has all these big, just forests of these things. But what has happened is they didn't realize when they planted them that they were structurally weak. They have this trunk up here, and then they have all these little branches that all come up like this, and so they all crack off. I noticed here on campus they have obliterated all of the Bradford pears along the walkway here. We used to have 4 or 5 of them. They cut every one of them down. But they proliferate, they seed, and they become an absolute plague. So you just don't want to plant Bradford pears. Mimosas are the other one. And this was the first invasive introduced into the southeast back in the early 1700s. Beautiful trees. Sidney Lanier's favorite tree, as a matter of fact. Beautiful pink blossoms. But boy, they seed down but they go bananas. They come up hundreds of thousands of them. They get the wilt. So they don't last very long. They're just really, they're beautiful, but again, they're horrible. So you just don't want mimosas. Paulownia, the princess tree, the native alternative to palpa, but these again are incredibly prolific. They can grow 15 feet in 1 year. And they call them the princess tree because it's from China. There's a tradition in China. It's Princess Paulownia. That's where they got the name from. But the tradition has it that when a female child is born in China, they would plant a princess tree so that by the time she was ready to get married, the tree was big enough to cut down to make furniture for her house. So, and it is a good furniture wood, but really and truly, it is an invasive, and it seeds down under everything. This one, this is my property in Henry County, and you can see I've got this invasive thing. This is autumn olive. This thing is still in the nursery trade. And as a matter of fact, my father, God rest his soul, actually planted the first one in our property in Henry County. And every time I give him a little power line, cut them down. They're just absolutely horrible. They can grow up to 15, 20 feet. They're just horrible. And they have these seeds, these fruits, which actually make very good jam, and birds love them. And people still buy them and plant them for wildlife food, but don't ever do it. This one is I think this one is the thorny olive, the Iliagnus that we're looking at. There's the other one that's more, not quite as prolific, but it's got shinier leaves. It's a little bit different from this one, but oh man, it's a pain. So not to do it. Honeysuckle, of course, another one, Japanese honeysuckle. Lovely, children love to pick the flowers and pull the little cord and drink the nectar. I did that many times. But it will strangle trees, it girdles trees and deforms them. It's really horrible stuff. We had a real big problem with this in our property in Henry County. This is a new one on the scene, the Japanese chaff flower. I didn't quite know what this was when it started to invade my garden in Decatur. It just came over like this big tide coming over. And so I took a piece of it down to the Wild Center. That's the Oakhurst Community Garden, and the gardener down there said, "Oh yeah, Japanese chaff." Apparently, it's starting in DeKalb and Fulton counties, and it hasn't quite got out. It's not listed on the official invasive species list. They think perhaps the seed came in on a hiker on like pants or something like that. It's horrible, horrible stuff. And it hurts, they're prickly, when it gets on you, they're horrible. And not only that, it proliferates, and it has these roots you cannot get it out of the ground, and it's just really, you have to dig it out with a mattock. It's horrible stuff. You had a question there?
I was wondering about that. There's one, I don't know, I'm never been able to find anybody who knows what it is, but it's real sticky when you pull it up. Is
Is it sticky as in thorny or gummy? Gummy?
Yeah, kind of.
Does it have yellow flowers on it?
Not sure.
In the fall, maybe a resin weed, well, maybe rosin weed, if you want to call it that. I'd have to see it, really and truly. Bring a piece in, I'll be happy to look at it. I may not know what it is, but I might. But yeah, it could possibly, but this stuff is horrible. It really is. And of course, the other thing, this Japanese climbing fern, again, it looks so pretty, but oh man, it's just an absolute plague. So you need to just get rid of it. How can we can control them? Well, if you're into the chemicals, we can apply herbicides. If you're going to do that, make sure you read the labels. Make sure you dilute correctly. Wear gloves. Don't be spraying that stuff and breathing it in. Be really careful. My neighbor, I gave him an apple tree, because actually I was rather selfish because I planted my own apple, an apple tree for me in my yard in Decatur. Didn't have enough room for a companion apple, so I gave one to my neighbor. He's got 2 acres, and I said, you plant your apple. So he did, he planted it. And then, just a few weeks ago, he came to me and said, this tree is dead. He said, what's the matter with it? I said, well, I know what's the matter with it. The guy who mows his yard had sprayed, it was the virgin sour vine on the fence. And it was amazing because I've got a fig tree right just on the other side, and if that stuff had drifted, it would kill my fig. Instead of that, the wind blew, drifted back. This apple tree is dead as a nest. I hate herbicide. I never use it. I'm really organic. But, this is the way that they do it. Even Trees Atlanta uses a lot of this stuff. Mowing, if that's appropriate, certainly, certain types of things. Mowing is actually good for kudzu if you can get it down and then just mow it off. Pull it, cut it by hand, which is my method of preference. Also, biological controls. But that's a mixed blessing. The thing is, that kudzu beetle, I don't know if you've seen it, that little gray-looking thing. It's a little triangular kind of looking thing. Eats kudzu, sure, but it also eats crops like soybeans. So it's becoming another plague like the boll weevil. So you have to be really careful with biological controls. They're working on one, I think it's the Asian ladybug for the woolly algae. I can never say that. The one that's devastating the hemlock up in North Georgia. It's horrible. Trees Atlanta is instituting what they call the Have You Heard initiative. They have 100 sheep and goats as well. And what they're doing is letting them out there in the Atlanta Beltline, which is another one of their projects, and just letting the sheep and the goats eat it down. They are wonderful. To control an acre of kudzu, it would cost $4,000 over a period of, 2 years, 5 years? I cannot remember exactly. That's why I need my notes here. But a goat or a sheep can just simply eat its way through all of that stuff. So really and truly, that's the way to go if you can have sheep or goats in your place. And of course, don't plant those invasive species. Choose native alternatives. Anyway, what can we do? Questions, Deborah?
Well, actually, it's not a question. It's just what you were talking about, the other side. They tell you that they'll dissipate. It's like Roundup, they'll dissipate in 24 hours. But I was doing some research on it myself, and I have found a number of research papers that say if you spray herbicide, somehow it's going to get into the water system, and the ones that are suffering the most from it are the amphibians.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and they haven't proved it yet, but I mean, why even take a chance?
I know. I know. I agree. When, there are other methods to cope with these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're preaching to the choir here. I'm just like, totally.
I just want to share it with everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, they will tell you.
Oh, yeah.
That it's going to be gone.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, as much as I really love Walter Reed's show, he's always up there preaching, the gospel of herbicide. And even talking about, with vegetables, too. He said, well, read the label. If it says you can use it, use it. I don't think so. Anyway, what can we do to help the urban forest? Well, certainly preserve those existing trees, plant new trees, join or start a group in your neighborhood to plant trees in your community, and educate yourself and others about the importance and care of trees. Just got a few websites here, Trees Atlanta, of course, and there's many, many volunteer opportunities with them. And as I say, this is the height of tree planting season, so they're a wonderful group. If you want to know more about invasive species, there's a good website for you. And if you want to know about plant diseases, we haven't said anything today about insects and diseases, but Dougwood is a good website for that. Just a couple of other things I wanted to sort of leave you with two things. One poem and then, of course, one thing else. This is by A.E. Houseman, and I've only got a few of the lines, but I want to read the whole poem to you. Loveliest of trees, the cherry mouse, is hung with bloom along the bough, and stands about the woodland ride, wearing white for Eastertide. Now, with my 80 years and 10, 20 will not come again, and take from 70 springs a score, it only leaves me 50 more. And since to look at things in bloom, 50 springs are little room, about the woodland I will go, to see the cherry hung with snow. There's so many beautiful poems about trees, really and truly. And remember the lesson of the Lorax. So, catch, calls the onceler. He lets something fall. It's a truculent seed. It's the last one of all. You're in charge of the last of the truculent seeds. And truculent trees are what everyone needs. Plant a new trucula. Treat it with care. Give it clean water and feed it fresh air. Grow a forest. Protect it from axes with hacks. Then the Lorax and all of his friends may come back. Thank you, guys.
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
So, how would you assess this campus in terms of woodedness? And if you could plant something, where would you plant it?
Well, as a matter of fact, it was yesterday, I was walking from the Student Center back to my office in E building, and I was just thinking, you know, we could actually have sort of a neighborhood campus project and plant trees here at GPC on our campus. We do have some beautiful trees, you know, by the library, well, actually it's in front of this building, in front of the Student Center, that sort of spinny of lovely old post-its that we have there. You know, we were really very upset when they built the library. You may not remember that. I've been here that long when they built the library. But they tried to minimize the trees that they cut down, but they did cut down a lot. And then to put that parking lot in, they cut down a lot. So, you know, we have lost a lot of the trees that were there. So we definitely do need to replenish that. You need to make sure that you plant a diversity of trees, not all the same variety. You don't want monoculture. You want different species. In shaded areas, I would recommend dogwoods, of course. Also, what do they call the juice tree, the redbud. And then, of course, we could also use a few oaks here, scarlet oaks, post oaks, you know, white oaks, you know, different varieties of oaks. We could probably throw in a few bald cypress here and there. Certainly no Bradford pears. Gosh, I mean, whatever else. I like different kinds of trees. I just got myself a basswood, which is a native linden, to plant down in my place, and then we some more hickories. But of course, I got woodlands down there. So, but here in the urban environment, there's a lot of trees that we can plant. Actually, Trees Atlanta, if you're interested, has a list of 50 species that do well in urban areas. So you want to go and check out that list. If you go to their website, there's actually one of the bars there. You can actually click into that, and it will tell you what kind of tree, how big they are, and that sort of thing. So I would recommend that you do that.
Are those all native species that are existing?
Most of them are. Trees Atlanta doesn't plant exclusively native species. There are sometimes, you know, other kinds, but they try and stay away from invasive types. Like here on campus in the parking lot down here, we've got all these beautiful saw-toothed oaks, but those are invasive. And you're not supposed to plant them, but, you know, we've got a bunch of them. But, you know, you have to be careful. And again, I would recommend diversity more than anything.
You know, one thing too, you said that the nursery is still selling certain things. They still sell pretzels. I mean, somebody used to talk.
I agree.
Not that they listen.
I agree. Yes. And not only that, I mean, we have our own botanical garden down here at Decatur campus, and they have plant sales. That's how they try and keep them, you know, they keep themselves in business by doing that. But also, native plants which you cannot get anywhere else. So, you know, you're doing two things at once by going there to buy some things. So absolutely, I'm all for it. Really and truly, yeah. Tim.
Reverend, is the chestnut blight over with, or is that still ongoing?
No, it's not over with, unfortunately, but they are breeding with the American chestnut. I don't know if you all are aware of the fact, but, you know, they used to be, our forests used to be full of them, but of course, they had a blight that went through along with the American elms as well, and just obliterated them. They have found, as a matter of fact, in Pine Mountain, they found a few American chestnuts who have survived the blight. And what the Forest Service is doing is they have come up with a cultivar, which is actually a cross between the native chestnut and some other kind. I'm not sure exactly which one, probably one of the Chinese chestnuts, but it's more disease resistant. So they do have them, and I think you can buy them. But again, they're not that common, you know, but it's such a devastation, you know.
We have a question from,
Online, okay.
yeah, what's the best type of grass to plant if you have oak trees in your front yard?
My answer to that question is no grass is the best grass to plant. I'm a mulch person. Nothing is going to grow underneath those trees, okay? If you're going to have grass, then what you're going to have to do is you'll have the area underneath the tree. Go in for ferns or hostas or plant other types of plants that love shade, okay? Because no grass will grow under shade. So make that wild sort of native area underneath the tree, and then plant the grass out in the open area. And of course, in that case, you can plant whatever kind of grass grows well.
What about things like mondo grass or lirio?
Mondo grass, lirio actually is an invasive species, but it does thrive in shade. So, I mean, if you want to go ahead and deal with that, yes, you can plant mondo. I would not plant mondo. I would
mondo or lirio?
Mondo is a much smaller, more delicate variety. Lirio is the bigger one.
Yeah,
It is prolific, and it has all those rhizomes.
Oh, I have that.
Spend my life with a meta. I'm sorry, dear?
Is the Mondo okay?
It's less invasive than liriope, so if you're going to plant one, yes, it's more well-behaved. But again, I would advocate mulch and things like hostas, ferns, you know, Solomon seal, the native plants. Let's have some more of that, okay? Less grass. I'm sorry, I'm anti-grass.
You know, there's, in Cass County, every one of our parks has a Friends Up for it. And I went to a meeting with the rest of the people who are involved, and we're all doing the same thing. We're trying to get rid of all the invasives, and we're planting native plants.
Wonderful.
The invasives are just overwhelming.
Overwhelming. Yeah. Nature Conservancy periodically has, you know, you volunteer and you go and pull privet and stuff like that. You can actually, and Trees Atlanta does that too. So yeah, you can actually join a group and go and eradicate invasives, but it's a non-ending task. Anything else?
I mean, suggestions for bamboo. It's already been there and it has the underground remnant. I have a young man who will come out every now and then and get it with a
Machete.
Yeah, that's what we're chopping it down the space. But other than that, I don't know how to keep it at bay.
Yeah, you've got to get those right.
As for vinegar, I do go out every spring to my 12-year-old and 15-year-old and kick over the new shoots because they don't come up small, they come up as an actual shoot. And if you don't get them in time, they're already hard enough that you can't kick them over.
Why?
So you don't, like you, I don't like to use any kind of
chemical. No. I mean, you carry on with the vinegar, but I don't know. I really don't know if it works. I think maybe the best bet's a bulldozer, but other than that,
that might be our next stop.
Maybe. I don't know. Anybody else in here have any advice for bamboo?
Well, it's hard to plant it, but I heard if you want to plant it, you should take a trash can and cut out the bottom where it's like 4 feet deep, maybe 5 feet deep, so that it can spread.
I don't know, that bamboo, I think we'll find a way. It's tricky stuff.
I know. It's horrible.
I did hear there was a non-invasive bamboo, but I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I have heard that too, but I'm not even interested in planting.
I'm not sure.
I don't trust them.
My mom lives off Lennox Road in a senior care place, and there's some bamboo, there's a lot next to her that's just wooded, that I'm not kidding, it's that big around. But it's not thick, it's just sporadic, and I've never seen it grow like that.
The Atlanta Zoo's got a nice stand of it too, you know, with a big thing. I mean, it can be beautiful, but You don't want it in your yard. I'm sorry, Amy, I really don't have an answer to the bamboo problem. I know, but they're not eating that. They're eating a special kind of bamboo. But yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to do with bamboo. Anyway.
I think there are recipes for kudzu.
Yes, you can actually make, what's called like a quiche with kudzu. Yeah, kudzu is the young shoot's quite edible, you
Yeah,
know.
we need more recipes.
I guess
Maybe-
we do. People hungry. Harvest kudzu. I don't know. Well, I certainly enjoyed this. Thank you so much for letting me do this.
Most of my yard is invasive. I guess I gotta get to work.
Well, I will confess, I've got far too many in mine too.
And I get all that junk and fancy.
I know. Go out there, several hours, it's a good stress reliever. We'll get rid of anger.
Maybe for the, especially this one.
Get those invasive.
Okay, well, I'll stay in to talk right now. And you're up to
Thank you so much. When I sent the email, I thought you would probably laugh at my face, saying, oh,